Thanks for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast series, where we profile those who have overcome or are in the process of overcoming any life event. We have 3 objectives with this series. We want to help you define and be resolved that we are together with you no matter what it is you're experiencing. We want to join you to help you through whatever you're encountering. There's no problem, there's no challenge in a life that is too difficult that together we cannot overcome. Our second objective is to help you develop the resolve that there are multiple solutions, multiple options to whatever life dilemma you might be experiencing. It may be difficult to think that, but it's in fact true that when we think into and think through situations, we can come up with various options to reach a satisfactory resolution. Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If what you're experiencing is possibly a result of a decision from some time in the past that if you had a life redo, you would make a different decision, we want to help you with those critical thinking skills such that you can very objectively, analytically assess all the facts and factors involved in making a very informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty. Together, we are the Cooper Culture, and the Cooper Culture is sponsoring this podcast series. Today, we feature Donna Tashjian on the 4th episode, where she addresses trust. Donna experienced a very traumatic early childhood. Marty, what are some takeaways that our listeners can gain from this podcast?
Ron, I enjoyed this one as much as I enjoyed the previous one on emotions, where Donna talked to us about healing our emotions. This one on trust, she walks us through the process of learning to trust others, even though we've had a past that created a non-trusting way of thinking. She did a great job in teaching us how to learn to trust again.
This is a true life adventure of establishing and having to reestablish trust. Let's learn together. Donna, thank you again for joining us on this podcast series. This next topic is particularly intriguing to me based on your childhood, that you had to experience a very traumatic early childhood experience which possibly could have resulted in you not being able to trust men for possibly the rest of your life. But Donna, I'm very interested in, Marty and I both, and our listeners are very interested in the topic of trust, establishing, and when trust is broken, how do you reestablish trust? I know of numerous instances in which trust has been betrayed. Is it possible? I think the answer is obvious. Yes, it is possible. But what did you have to go through, Donna, to reestablish trust? You've got me captivated. Donna, talk to us about.
Oh, well, you mentioned the having a issue, if you will, or trusting men. But part of that picture was also somewhat with my mom and the way I was treated, in my opinion. And so when we've been seriously hurt from something in our life, I went into a cave. I'm not going to trust anybody. No one's safe. Generally, people aren't trustworthy, and they don't keep their word. I always need to stay on guard. And, always kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Yeah, you're nice to me now, but when's it going to get bad? And, of course, whatever we focus on, we get more of. And learning that through that process is that we really don't even trust ourselves because we probably made stupid decisions, in our opinion. And so it reminds me when my husband and I were engaged and we were looking at our wedding vows, Now, this was in the days where, I don't know whether they still do, I really haven't heard it, where they said that the wife was going to obey her husband. And I wasn't having any of that. Now, he's a wonderful giving man. Of course, he's got some flaws, but he never gave me any reason not to trust him. He always kept his word. In the time that we dated for 3.5 years before we were married. But I told him, I said, I'm going to keep my vows, and I can't promise you that I will obey you. So I'm like, I can't say that. And he didn't have a problem with it. And he still knows I don't like to obey too much. But I was afraid to trust. I wasn't going to give. To me, obedience meant dictatorship, because that's what I experienced. It wasn't a choice. It was being forced to do something, and I wasn't going to do that. And so learning that process, I mean, he knew that before he married me, and he still married me. So learning that, how to begin to trust ourselves, and then in turn we get to trust other people. A lot of times I called it living in a shell or a cave. It creates, when we are not honest with how we're feeling, it creates shallow relationships, and we live kind of afraid all the time. And, as I said in a previous episode, but we say we're okay when we're not okay. It's like, I know this pain, I know this situation. It feels kind of normal to not trust. It feels normal to keep everybody at a distance. And if I do trust, they'll reject me anyway. And so it's learning that, to be able to be honest with how I felt. And I was wondering, have either one of you ever slammed cabinet doors instead of talking?
Oh, have we done that? Let me just say very briefly, Donna, I will tell you it was me that I'm a Washington Redskins football fan, and I am a terrible, terrible spectator. When things aren't going right, I took the door to the TV cabinet, I slammed it, and it fell in pieces. So Marty knows me to be this kind of person that as long as I can, speaking of emotions, I let my emotions take control for a few seconds of my life.
Yeah, I felt like I couldn't really even communicate to Lee, my husband, how I was feeling. So he'll find me, slamming dishes and slamming cabinet doors and stuff like that. And he'd come in there and say, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Fine."
Right.
And, and I'm not making light of emotions at all, but beginning to actually begin to communicate how we're feeling feels scary, which was, talking about emotions. So we compress stuff, and it causes all kinds of feelings. Beginning to trust is when it's been damaged. Takes time. That's the best way I know how to. But the person, both sides of the relationship, have to begin to be willing to work with each other where they are. And Lee knew my story. My husband knew my story. He knew where I was, and he was willing to work with me where I was as I began to. One of the things I said to him all the time, it's now humorous to us, is he would say, "I love you," and I would say, "What?" And he would say, and so my process in doing that was, I wanted to hear it again.
Mm-hmm.
Say it again. I don't believe it yet. Tell me again. I'm not sure you do. Will you really love me? And learning to, if you don't have that spouse to do that, finding a friend, and ultimately God, who will love us no matter what. But it's learning to reach out. It took some time. That's the biggest thing that I'm saying is it takes time, but both, you have to be willing to take the risk of rejection, because living in the cave is really lonely. And having the opportunity to share. So that's some of my suggestions.
Talk to us a little bit more, Donna, about your emotions. Now, here's what I'm reading into this. Early on, you said there was a point in your life where you could not trust anybody. Now, I'm interpreting that, and maybe incorrectly, that your emotions said, I cannot trust anybody, but then it appears that there was a point in your life where you felt very aware of yourself and you had developed enough confidence that you could be vulnerable enough to express this either to other people, or at least you became very aware of who you are and what is happening to you internally. Is that an aspect of how you overcame what seemed to be emotions that for whatever period of time in your life you couldn't trust anybody?
You know, when it's been a while, you have to sit and think. What was actually the process that I went through? It was beginning to stand on my own feet, and for my situation, is beginning to trust God to take care of me. That was one thing I never lost through it all. And that was a fortifying foundation that He has never failed me. People have, but He hasn't. And learning to separate the two, and including people in the church have hurt me and failed me, but that doesn't mean God has. So a lot of times they are equating each other, but learning to process, again, all of the things that I've shared in the previous episodes is processing the emotions, knowing how I feel, did a lot of journaling, my emotions, and we're going to get into the next one, I believe, in the next episode, which forgiveness is a huge part of restoring trust. I don't want to go there completely because that's next time. But forgiveness is part of the process. And so stay tuned, because I'll be telling you what forgiveness really is and how to begin to forgive and forgive yourself and forgive others, so that you can begin to allow yourself the opportunity to love, to trust people again, even people who have disappointed you.
Talk to us a little bit about the church and accepting. Marty and I have seen it. We're seeing in present time this kind of thing, that it seems there are some people who just cannot accept. And in your previous podcast, you talked about judgment, which we sometimes tend to judge others. I personally think of judgment as a behavior that we expect, but we don't necessarily live by what we're verbalizing to others. Therefore, that is considered judgment. But it's, how would you, and you're a pastor, and I don't know that you've seen it in your church, but it does seem that there's some church members who are maybe just not accepting of, we're going to be very judgmental of, or something. And I think acceptance is just a huge overarching topic, that none of us is perfect, but can we stand with a brother and sister and help each other through whatever we're experiencing?
I've seen a lot in the church. I personally don't have my own church. I work in other churches and have my own ministry to help people through my coaching, etc. But I've seen a lot of leaders, even, of churches do things that are extremely hurtful. Personally been the recipient of some of that as well. And what we tend to hold our leaders, if you will, and some people to a standard that doesn't allow them to be human. It doesn't allow them to make mistakes, not to allow them to have a bad day. And some of them, in my opinion, were really wrong. But when it comes down to it, my responsibility isn't to correct another person's wrong. My responsibility is for my own attitude, my own mind, and my own heart. Whatever I put out, I will reap. If I'm judging someone else, telling and in saying that their behavior is wrong, somewhere along the line, I'm going to reap that back. So learning to sow the crop that I actually want to reap has been transformational for my mindset in letting go, because I got more than the one story I've shared of painful things that have happened to me, and it seems to be more painful in the church. It is devastating to people. Because I believe we're in the church, we're getting deeper in a spiritual level. It's not like somebody at work rejecting me. It's different. And so learning that no matter where you are, people that are listening to this today, no matter what anybody's done to you, when we judge them, when we hold that against them, that is what we are going to reap back somewhere in our lives. I personally don't want that crop. No one is worth it. I want to let it go, which is part of forgiveness. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Donna, we're looking forward to forgiveness and your insights into that. But before we get to that topic, I just sense that now I'm going to refer to Lee. I have not spoken with him. I don't know him, but your description is Lee was very tolerant of you. He's saying, what I'm perceiving, he was saying, if not explicitly, at least implicitly, Donna, you're worth the wait. I'll wait for you however long it takes. I will do whatever is required to gain your trust because you're worth it. And I, Lee, want to do everything I can to build your self-esteem. I'd be very interested in perhaps Lee would be willing to talk with us to give his insights of how he was able to blend with you, if that's an appropriate term, or adapt to you.
Well, this story that I'm sharing was mostly about my fault. So we weren't really getting into his.
Lee may want to join us to be able to defend himself when you mention, we're not talking about his faults.
But overall, generally speaking, he was very loving. I won't say he was always tolerant, but he was very loving and understanding of that process. And we made a lot of promises to each other that covered both of our faults, because each one of us in a marriage, there's faults. There's things that you say wrong, there's things that you do wrong. One of the promises that we made in our marriage is that we would never intentionally say something to hurt each other. So if he hurt me, it wasn't intentional. He almost always kept that promise, but not always. But overall, that was a promise that we made to each other, and pretty much we kept it all the time, is that if I was angry, I wasn't going to say something because I know him, I know how to hurt him. I'm not going to say what's going to hurt him just to hurt. And so learning to work through, he won't come on the episode, so you're going to have to take my version of it. But learning to be able to know that, this trust isn't always just about marriage, even though this kind of episode is turning in that direction. But it's learning to begin to trust your own decisions. The biggest healing for me was beginning to know who my identity really was, which I've shared before, is like who my identity did not equal what had happened to me, circumstances. It didn't equal even my worst decisions. Those weren't equal to my value and who I was. And so to me, that is a key in learning in the trust process, is learning to find out who you are so that you can begin to live from that place, not from the place of brokenness.
That's very well said. And yes, while we're talking about trust in the context of marriage, because you and Lee are married, Marty and I are married, I think a lot of the precepts of trust apply to the workplace. There are those of us who have had our trust betrayed in the workplace, and how can we reestablish the trust? I think there are a lot of truths that you discuss that are not exclusive to marriage, but it is the way we relate to each other, and it's God's desire of how He designed each one of us and intended for us to be.
I really appreciate all that you've said, because it's about the person that was hurt or the situation that happened to you. I'm just going to say, not to get into it, is very similar to some things that have happened to me. So I know exactly trust, where you've gone on that. So you've spoken to how the person like me and you, where we have to learn that what happened to us doesn't define us.
Right.
What I was saying is, even though the context of trust has been in marriage, you and Lee, Marty and me, I think there are a lot of the principles of trust to establish and reestablish trust has to do with relationships in general, whether you're dating, whether it's workplace.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to establish trust, and I am a believer it's going to take longer to reestablish trust. But if our attitude is that we want to, and again, Donna, we're a huge advocate of what you espouse, that we tend to become that on which we focus, and that is, if we focus on the positive, we will determine a way to reestablish trust if that's what we want to do, but it is values-based.
Yes, absolutely it is. And the same thing applies as what I shared in the previous episode, is of talking about what we focus on, we empower. And so if I'm focusing on my pain of my past, it's going to influence the decisions and the relationships that I have in the future. But if I've been able to heal and let go of my past, then I make different decisions. I see the world differently. I'm able to look at people differently, look at myself differently, and be able to look at the world with gratitude and hope and all of that. So it all plays into together. All of these episodes go together to build a picture of finding out who we truly are and being able to truly, truly heal from the past. In the beginning, when I tried to talk about my past, I couldn't even articulate it without tears. Or I told the story and it was monotone. This happened, this happened, this happened, like facts. No emotions. And then learning how to tell the story with emotions and being able to totally let it go and being able to be healed from the whole thing. It's possible. I'm telling you, it is possible to go through process and to be who God created you to be. And nothing in that happened to us is ever wasted. God always turns it for good.
That's a great segue to our next topic, forgiveness. I am very interested, as our listeners are, how could you achieve forgiveness in the context of what you've been through? Can you come back with us, Donna, and talk to us about that?
I can do that.
Great. Thank you, Donna. I hope you'll choose to engage with us on this topic of trust. Donna went through a period of her life where she felt she could not trust men or women because of the trauma that she endured. But let's engage both from the positive and the negative part of trust. What experience do you have in trust betrayal, something similar to what Donna experienced? But how did you overcome the lack of trust? How long did it take to reestablish trust? What was the process by which you reestablished trust? And we can help others by engaging with each other. Trust is a very fundamental aspect of effective relationships. For leadership, trust is probably the essential trait you have to be an effective leader with a group. In a marital relationship, trust is an essential factor of a very fulfilling relationship. When it's there, the marriage can be very trustful, very satisfying, very fulfilling. And when it's not there, it will cause two people, albeit they're married on paper, to live virtually two separate lives. Let's share experiences with both the positive and the negative of trust, and let's learn from each other. It is possible that if you've been betrayed through a lack of trust, that you may need coaching to help you overcome any aspects that are negative and dominant in your life. Donna, Marty, and I are certified coaches. We each will offer a complimentary session to help you determine if we are a good match for you to help you overcome anything in life that is keeping you from performing at your God-given optimized performance level. Marty and I also have a digital course on relationships where we focus on trust. We approach the relationships from a personality style perspective to where we can help you determine if the person in whom you have interest is the right person based on character, values, personality styles. People can be very different, yet be very complementary. That is Marty and me. We are very different, but in a very complementary way for each other. But let's engage, let's learn from each other. Let's determine what we have been through, what has worked, what has not worked. We hope we can earn a 5-star rating from you. We hope you will want to subscribe to this podcast series. To contact Donna, go to the website that is in the podcast description. To contact us, call us at 410-586-1875 or send an email message to ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com, or go to our website, thecooperculture.com. We look forward to engaging with you. We look forward to learning from your experiences. Let's share with each other and advance each other.